All right, there you have it. Opening remarks from Pam Bondi. She is on deck right now. This is her confirmation hearing for U.S. Attorney General. As you see, questioning is getting underway. We want to bring in right now to talk a little bit more about this Mike Nellis. He is a former senior advisor to Kamala Harris and the CEO of political fundraising and consulting firm Authentic. All right. Also with us, we're going to have a little bit later someone else joining us. Bradley Devlin is going to join us. But, Mike, I want to get to you first because Pam Bondi, she is very decorated. She's well-liked on both sides of the aisle. However, we know that she's going to face some tough questions, especially from the Democratic members who are there. What are some of the roadblocks that you anticipate they're going to try and throw into the mix here this morning?
Yeah, Senate Democrats are going to do their job today to hold these nominees accountable. I imagine today will be a lot less contentious than yesterday's hearing with Pete Hegseth. Pam Bondi's got a lot of experience. I think, like you said, she is liked across the aisle, but she's going to be held accountable to a lot of some of the threats that Donald Trump made on the campaign trail of coming after his political opponents and stuff like that. And I think people are going to be talking about her record in Florida. And so you're going to see a lot of that. But it is going to be a lot less contentious than what you saw yesterday with Pete Hegseth. I mean, Pam Bondi is, I think, on paper qualified for the role in a way that Pete Hegseth simply isn't, even if you just set aside the allegations of, financial misconduct and assault and drinking on the job and all sort of the sideshow of that yesterday. But I think you'll see Democrats trying to hold her accountable to her record and what she's going to do for Donald Trump when she becomes Attorney General.
Bradley Devlin joins us from the Daily Signal. Bradley, good morning. You just heard from Mike there. Do you believe the same thing? Rubio and Bondi are on deck today, but 4 of Trump's other picks are on Capitol Hill. Do you expect the same tough questioning for them as well? And tough questioning is different from going above and beyond the yelling, the screaming. It is entertaining to all of us to watch that throughout the day, but will it be business as usual, sort of straight, hey, let's figure out what your qualifications are, let's go with that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit more tame than yesterday. I think, the Senate likes to sell itself as the greatest deliberative body in the world, and I think conduct yesterday proved a lot of these hearings, whether they're confirmation hearings or not, are just kabuki theater, and that's really sad for the American people to see. And I think the closest thing we're going to get to the contentious levels of yesterday is with OMB pick Russ Vought later today. Russ is really aggressive on asserting the president's power, especially how the president spends congressional appropriations. He also could be asked about Schedule F and other reforms from the president's office, from the White House, that want to be put throughout the federal government, whether that's at DOD, at state, at the Justice Department, et cetera. So I think Russ, that really is the nerve center. OMB is the nerve center of the president, of the executive branch, and he's going to be really challenged, I think, by some senators today, and we'll see how he does.
Well, guys, you know how busy today is going to be. I want to show you how many confirmation hearings are happening today. There are several that will be going on simultaneously. You see Marco Rubio there, Secretary of State. Pam Bondi, of course, we just dipped into her confirmation hearing. Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, he is expected to be easily confirmed as well. John Radcliffe, CIA Director. He was formerly National Intelligence Director, so that's going to be very interesting in terms of some of the questioning there. Chris Wright, Energy Secretary, and Russell Vought, Office of Management and Budget. I want to ask you, we are hearing that most of these nominees now should have easy confirmation. But in the case that a cabinet pick is not approved, what happens then? What's the next step? Is it simply back to the drawing board? What kind of delay does that put on an incoming Trump administration? Bradley, I'll have you start with that.
Well, I think that is the message that President Trump is sending to a lot of Senate Republicans, right? Because we've done away with cloture on any sort of nominee, I think that President Trump's message to all of these senators is, I received the mandate. We have control of the House and the Senate because of the agenda I was selling to the American people. And if you obstruct that agenda, there will be hell to pay for you. And so, yeah, it is a little bit, they could go back to the drawing board, or you could see President Trump, there was a lot of posturing in November and December about what type of recess appointments could be made or any sort of other creative mechanisms that the executive branch could use to make sure that President Trump gets his team. But I think President Trump and Senator John Thune, the new majority leader, are working well together to make sure that those picks are going to get across the line. I mean, look at the way that Pete Hegseth has managed to court people like Joni Ernst, who were really skeptical at the beginning. That might, be the case for Lori Chavez-DeRemer later on, or for RFK, or for Tulsi Gabbard, some people who are going to face some pressure from the right. But at the end of the day, it's the president who won the mandate. It's the president who wants his team, and the Senate Republican Conference now seems pretty excited to give it to him.
Mike, President Biden will give his farewell address to the American people tonight. What do you expect we will hear from the outgoing president? We'll start with you, Mike, and end with you, Bradley.
Yeah, I think President Biden's going to remind people where we were 4 years ago when he inherited an economy that Donald Trump had driven off a cliff, where he had mishandled the COVID pandemic, and people were dying, and a lot of us couldn't even leave our houses, and it was a total mess. I think he's going to remind people where we started and where we are today, and the progress that we still need to go. He's going to try to frame his legacy of all the work that he's accomplished and the things that he's done, but really remind people like where we started 4 years ago. And obviously people are still frustrated with a lot of things like inflation and the situation at the border, but I think he's going to talk about everything that he's accomplished over the last 4 years.
And Bradley, what would those accomplishments be?
That's a great question. I couldn't tell you because there weren't many of them. I think what Biden's going to do tonight is he's going to disguise the disaster that has been the last 4 years by making an appeal to American values that he will add no substance to. And he'll say, in the next 4 years, if there's aggressive action on deportation or on, abandoning our allies, all this lofty talk that he likes to throw around to say that he's doing the right thing all the time, he's going to project that onto the next administration. But the truth is that Joe Biden is leaving Donald Trump a much more unstable world than Donald Trump gave Joe Biden, even with the COVID pandemic. 2 foreign wars, a border that's out of control, inflation that's finally coming down, but the dollar has not been and will not be the same for a very, very long time. And, he's going to have to disguise his failures with lofty, empty talk.
Well, as you said, the American people have voted. They want change, and we will be, of course, carrying the president's farewell address right here on Merit TV